Welcome to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. My name is Dan Holman, and my guest today is not just a retail expert, not just a coach or a mentor, but a friend, Marc Weiss with Management One. Marc, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to participate.
And so for those that don't know, Marc Weiss is with Management One. Management One is really, as I said to our producer this morning, the foremost authority, recognized as the foremost authority in merchandise intelligence. And Marc, for the retailer listening that doesn't really understand what merchandise intelligence is, that may not be familiar with Management One, give us the intro to Management One, please.
Well, I'd like to start with our vision of our core purpose is to provide financial security to retailers. And the way retailers spend more money on inventory than they spend on anything else, and how they manage that inventory determines their growth, their cash position, their ability to make decisions that lead them to more profitable sales. And the merchandise intelligence is what we do. We collect data and information, deliver it back to them in a consulting manner so that they can make better decisions to grow their business, capture market share, and create more cash.
Yeah, well said, really well said. And I wish, I'm glad it's being recorded, actually. I can listen back to it and use that to talk to retailers. And so, Marc, understanding the difference between what and why, and the sort of how, when you think about, what you're doing for that retailer, in your article last month, you talked about, you wish retailers, would maybe stop looking backwards and start looking forward. How does what you're doing help them to look forward?
The business is constantly evolving and changing, and if you won't, you look through the rearview mirror to learn and build and grow and get better. But if you always do what you've always done, you won't get what you've always gotten. You'll get less. And I think that retailers, the information that's mostly available to them is all backward-looking and isn't forward-looking. And we've developed, this is what merchandise intelligence does. It's a forward-looking mechanism that allows retailers to look into the future to make strategic and tactical decisions so they can manage their inventory in a way that they couldn't otherwise, in a way that a POS system allows them to look at what they've done but doesn't give them a chance to look at where they're going. And what we do is we not only allow them to look at where they're going, but we also give them an opportunity to have a progress monitoring tool that says, here are the decisions I made. How did they do? Was it successful? Wasn't it successful? What could I have done better? What can I change? So in terms of how retailers think about their business, they tend to think about things that are out of their control that influence them, and we focus on the things that they can control, and that's their data, their information. The benefit they have in working with us, for example, is that we have a neural network of everything that's going on, in North America as far as what's trending and what's selling. So the access to that information can be pivotal to their business, and they become part of a community that otherwise they're just a lone ranger.
Yeah, a lone ranger, a lone wolf, for sure. And I think we see more and more of that, those people stuck out on an island, by themselves.
Sure. I think community is important, and I think that if you look at the people who are developing communities, it's because communities help each other, and part of what we've engaged ourselves in doing is creating a community of sharing and transparency. And I think there's a natural paranoia and fear of retailers to share because they want to be protective of what they do, but honestly, there's more to be gained by sharing than by being overly protectionist about who you are and what you do. Nobody's going to do what you do better than you do, and people aren't necessarily good copycats. But, the ability to think forward and think about business differently. Dan, as you know, Marc, even things like how we market is different today than it was 5 years ago.
Right.
And so the whole retail landscape has changed. And they talk about apocalypse, but it's not really apocalypse. There's more independent retailers than there's ever been. It's just that you read about the people who aren't if there's a lesson to be learned about closures, it's really about the people who haven't adapted to the changes that are happening, and they look backwards as you started the whole conversation. It's not a backward-looking business; it's a forward-looking business.
And so when we see this, these closures, do you think that we see more closures because of people's resistance to change or their inability to change? And are they two different things?
Well, I don't think you have an ability to change if you're resistant to it.
Right.
So, I think that they go hand in hand. I think that people who are resistant to change don't want to change. And, then you look at people who are very open to change and willing to take risk. And, if you're in the retail business or if you're in any business today, you're in the business to take risks. Data allows you to measure the risks so that you don't go bankrupt. And I think if you look at the people who haven't, it's not that they have. Some of them have tried to change and failed at the changes they've tried, and they haven't been nimble enough to change. Other companies have been very good at seeing what's in front of them, and they've changed and they've adapted. And I think adaptability is huge in today's market. Not only do you have to adopt the change, but you've got to be able to adapt to it. So, and if you're resistant to that kind of thinking, hire people who aren't.
Right.
And get out of their way.
Right. And so this maybe speaks to something that we've had lots of conversation about, between, iterative and innovation. And, how much innovation do you feel like is required in today's modern retail world?
Well, I think there's a place for iteration and innovation. You don't have to be innovating every day, but, there are things that you need to be thinking about and how to implement those changes in your business. To be innovative, you don't do the same things the way you've always done them. But I don't know what a percentage would be, but it's not like you have to be innovating every day. But certainly, as you're thinking about it, this is a good time to think about it. It's the end of 2019. What are you going to do differently in 2020 to innovate your business? What are you going to do in 2020 to improve on the things that you did in 2019? Some of it can be iterative, or where you just improve on processes. Some of it just has to be a change in how you do things because it's not working, and you got to look at the data to see what's not working, and then adopt new ideas. And if they work, great, and if they don't work, just because you innovate doesn't mean you're going to be successful.
Right.
Innovation requires that you do change so that you can be more successful at something that you haven't been in the past, and then measure it. And if you measure it and it's not working, it doesn't mean innovation doesn't work. It just means the change you made didn't work. It doesn't mean another one won't.
Right. And how much does our historical pattern influence, where we're going, do you believe, when it comes to things like, what I should be looking to innovate or change or become more adaptable in my business, and those that I should be, looking at it at more iteratively?
I think it's a matter of how much fear you allow to enter into your thinking. I think when people start out in business, they don't have a lot to risk and lose. They're doing everything they can to make it work and to find a piece of the market. To gain a piece of the market share, they've got to be innovative and different to succeed. And then I think they did that, and they think that was that answer, that innovation that they created, that market niche that they created, is going to carry them forward for the next 10 or 15 years. Well, it isn't. I mean, they've got to be thinking about other ways to build and grow their business. So I think part of it is just people get comfortable and fearful because they now have something to protect. And I think they need to go back to their roots of how they really felt about things when they started the business and the risks that they were willing to take. I think as people become more risk averse, they actually put themselves in harm's way and really start to decline in their own business.
Yeah, and so let's just talk about being risk adverse. How do we become more and more risk adverse, or I shouldn't say how do we become more risk adverse? How do we stop ourselves from becoming more and more risk adverse?
Well, I think it's a difficult question. I think that you've got to be out there and thinking about things. I mean, I think you've got to take time away from your business, explore other ideas and opportunities, not be afraid of looking at your competition and what they're doing well that you could be doing better. I think that there's a sense to defend your position rather than really being objective and looking at what other people are doing. And I think part of it is is your ability to critique yourself. Hire consultants, I think, is a great thing. And if one consultant doesn't work well, find another one. In our company, we're constantly hiring consultants to look at under the cover of everything we do, from our technology to our delivery. I mean, we don't stay stagnant. We're constantly moving forward and saying, here's what we do well today. What could we be doing better? Here's what we're not doing as well as we wish we were. And what do we need to do better? And then develop the metrics around it to measure it.
And do you find that?
And I think, and I do. And one other thing, Dan, I wanted to mention was risk averse. Risk is only dangerous if you don't have a way to measure it. And I think if you have a way to measure it, you use data to measure risk, and that helps you become less risk averse. It's when you don't know how to measure or keep scorecards that don't allow you to take the risks. And if you're a person that is risk averse, then put processes in place that allow you to find a pathway to do that. And don't just hire people like yourself. So I think there's lots of opportunities for businesses to look introspectively at their business through the eyes of other people, their customers, the people that they work with, outside consultants. I think there's lots of opportunities to do that. But part of it starts with your own willingness to open up and be more available to that kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, let's talk about, you bring that into your business. You invite you invite people to look under the cover. How much coaching does that take with your team? Does your team feel like you're always in transition? They never do things right? That we're always trying to fix something?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think you have to have a vision, and you have to be talking about where you're going and sharing that. I mean, you can't be a pinball machine going all over the place. I think if you and then your people do get confused. And I think that they just wonder, are we always in a constant change of flux? On the other hand, if you have a vision and you know what your core purpose is and you know where you want to go with your business, and you can lead your team and you can lead your people there, and the natural change to improve is just part of you getting to where you want to go to. So I think part of it is just a leadership issue.
Okay, and so for those retailers that are out there that Marc, let's be fair, lots of them are pinballing. Lots of them are bouncing around. What do you say to them to get them to slow down and stop bouncing and focus, or even try to uncover or discover what their vision is?
Well, I think you just nailed it. I mean, it's focus.
Focus.
Do less. Yeah, it's just do less and do one or two things better and focus. Don't try to do everything at once. I think a little bit at a time, focus. What will provide the most value to your business, in the next 6 months, period. And that's what you focus on. And then, because that'll give you the greatest return on investment, and put a business value on it. I mean, make a list of the things that you want to accomplish and rate them 1 to 10. What are the things that are going to give me the greatest return on investment that I can decide on, and then just focus on 1 or 2 of those things for the next 3 to 6 months.
But now you and I as business owners know that that's not always the easiest thing to do. And I think you and I are also somewhat synonymous in that we reach out to other people to say, here, help me identify, what you see as opportunity or challenge or obstacle, and what I then can bite onto and believe in and impact or affect change with my team. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it is fair, and I think you've got to be willing to listen to people and hold you accountable as a leader too. That's a two-way street.
Right.
I've got people in my organization that work to keep me focused, and I think it's being self-aware in terms of, if you're the type of person that just chases the next great idea, the next shiny object, you are going to confuse the heck out of your people, and you're going to take your people down rabbit holes, and nothing will ever get done. I think slowing things up and being focused is really the answer, and that's tough for a lot of people to do. Mm-hmm. On the flip side of the coin, there's people who don't do anything to change.
Right.
So, their focus is on staying where they've always been, and that's just as dangerous. So I think for people who are risk averse, we're not asking them to go out and I think people think about, and that's part of why this whole idea of innovation and iterative is better than change to me, because I think change is a difficult thing. What does change mean? And it's scary. It's, what do I have to change? Change isn't good. Why can't things be the way they always were? And, well, things aren't the way they always are because other people are out there doing things differently. You can't change that.
Right.
Interesting pun. But I do believe that if you think about what you want to innovate in your business, where you want to be iterative in your business and improve processes, I think you can begin to look at what you can do to be different, to change. It's an easier way to define it and go after it, and kind of puts a fence around it and says, I want to have better sales training. I want my people to be able to be better at engaging with the customers, and I think there's a good return on investment. If I'm a multi-store client, I want to change the way we transfer product. We're not going to do that anymore, and here are the reasons why. I mean, there's lots of things that you can look at in your business that don't have to be big, but retail is detailed to doing a lot of little things right. So small changes can add up to a lot of profitability. The one thing I'd like to remind listeners is one way to improve profitability is to improve productivity. And one way to focus what you want to do in 2020 is to think about how can I create more productivity within my organization? What does that look like? What do I have to iterate or innovate on to make that happen?
Right. Agreed. And so, okay, let's talk about, here we are. It's the end of December. We're walking into 2020. You talked about having if I could have one New Year's resolution, it's to get retailers to stop looking backwards. What other things can they do to help them look forward? What do they need to be better at to solidify their position, at the start of this next decade in retail?
Well, there's a lot of answers to that question, Dan. That's a pretty wide swath to go after.
It may be wide.
I think if I had a New Year's resolution for retailers, I would take a strength and a weakness and work on both of them. How do I make a strength that I have better by continuous improvement, and what do I have as a weakness that I could change and look at my business differently to improve on? And which strength and which weakness that I have will have the most profound impact would make it a business value decision. Which one that I select will improve my business the most. And talk to people about it. I mean, hire consultants or get into a group or a peer-to-peer group and talk to other retailers about it and get feedback. I think that I would focus on, because that keeps you focused on two things: a strength and a weakness.
Fair. Okay. So, Marc, jump back in time, not that long ago when you were a retailer. What was your aha moment that there was another world out there for you? Like, when did you decide that being a retailer was no longer for you, that you were going to be better served in life as, in helping retail?
I think if I had been a great merchant, I probably would have stayed in retail. I discovered early on that I had a lot of friends in the market. Back when I was a retailer, this really dates back, the trade shows were just starting, and I'd be in New York every 4 to 6 weeks, and I made a lot of great relationships. And a lot of vendors that I became close with were my age, and they would send me product, and the product they were sending me was selling better than the product that I was buying. And I recognized early on that I was an okay merchant, but not a great merchant, and that I was really better at the analysis side. I love merchandising. I love being a merchant. I love thinking strategically about things. But I also recognized that I didn't have enough merchandising backbone in terms of my own taste level or sense of where the market was going to go to be successful. And so I chose the analysis side. And I think I'm glad that I had an opportunity to open stores and negotiate leases and go to New York and buy, and I'm happy for all that, because I think it all adds up to, what we've developed today, which is why we think of our business as being retailers first.
Right.
But the biggest change for me was that just didn't think I was going to be the merchant that I wanted to be, that I thought I could be.
Okay. And so really I asked that question to try to get us back to today, to help retailers understand that there are things that we're really good at and things that we're not so good at. And in today's world, we can't afford not to be good at things. And in today's world, we have to look for people that are better than we are. If you'd have had the opportunity to go and get someone in your business that was a better merchant, that would have made you a better retailer, would you do it? Would you have done it?
I believe that I would have, and I've thought about that, Dan. I tried. I mean, I hired buyers, and their performance wasn't a lot better than mine. And so had somebody in my organization really been a great buyer, then I might have tried that angle and focused more on. I was early into computers. I spent a lot of time looking for ways to. Point of sale systems were just starting to come about back when I started, and that was a part that intrigued me. So I do believe that had I found the right person or persons, that I might have stayed in it from that standpoint. But my passion had been, I always saw myself as, being a visionary in the merchandise side. And when I found that I really wasn't, then part of my passion started to dismantle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah. Well, I'm sure glad it didn't work out for you.
Thank you. I'm happy too. I mean, I'm in a better place. You find your niche and where you're good at, and I've found a real passion in what I do, and I'm glad to be able to do it. And I'm not jealous of the retailers who are great merchants. I admire them. I am jealous of them, but I'm not jealous of them in that way. I admire.
You're
them.
more of an admirer.
And as I've gone through the last 30 years, and I've really gotten to see some great merchants, I really do. There's, I look at we really focus on the science of it, but it doesn't mean that I don't honor people who have a gut and a feel for where the future is going, and take those risks, and we have an opportunity to measure those, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, very good. And so, Marc, how much time do you spend, traveling through North America today to see different retailers?
Well, I always like to think that I don't do that much traveling, and then I look at my schedule and I find out that I do a lot of traveling.
Right.
A lot. I mean, I go to the trade shows. Whenever I go to a trade show, I visit stores. I get involved with our clients. I visit and learn and listen and hear them, because I think if you don't stay close to that, you lose something. You just, it's one thing to look at data. It's another thing to be out there in the real world dealing with the issues that they're dealing with and listening to them. I think I like to think of myself as a good problem solver, but really a good problem solver is a person that can ask good questions.
Right.
And, part of why I go out and visit and stay in the field is to ask questions and learn, and what are the challenges that are facing, and then tailor the conversation back to those things that retailers can control, not the things they can't control. And I think that, if there's one message that I'd want to share with your listeners, Dan, is that don't focus on the things you can't change, but focus on the things you can change internally. There's a huge market out there for you to capture if you do that.
Mm-hmm. Marc, are you comfortable sharing a success story, somebody that you've seen grow? And you don't have to use specifics, but just to talk in generalities of that success that you're seeing, as you travel, and you've seen retailers, let's be fair, for 30 some odd years, are there retailers that are just out there that you still remain in awe of the success that they're achieving?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are retailers that I've seen have done amazing things because they think about how they can be more creative and be closer to their customers. Think about the experiences that their customers have in the stores, and aren't always chasing the the next thing out there. I mean, I know I talked about innovation, but I also think you just can't be chasing things. I mean, we've seen stores do remarkable things. We had a store that grew by $1 million last year and shrink their purchases by $600,000 and create a lot of cash and pay off all their debt. I mean, that was, and everybody. Well, I hear other retailers complaining about Amazon and the internet and everybody else. They just focused on how can they innovate within their own business and raise the level of their people. Did things on social media that were daring and exciting. And I think there's a lot of things that can be done. We've had several clients open. We just had a client open up their 5th store out of the cash flow that's been created out of the other 4. As a matter of fact, all 5 have been grown out of their own cash flow, and there's many other examples of that. And I think these are people who are thinking about what they can do in the brick and mortar area. For the people who are in e-commerce, the ones that aren't trying to duplicate what's already out there and are finding their own niche, I think they're finding some success. It's just a riskier thing. I think part of what retailers have to think about is there's a market that they can own within their own world if they just pay attention to it and don't think about the big world out there means that there's more competition. So e-commerce is another whole discussion, but I think if we just focus on what brick and mortar can do, I think it's a great time for retailers. I think that digitally with creative people that are in your own neighborhood, you can look great. You can do things today that retailers couldn't do when I started out. I'm very envious of the retailers who are in business today because of the tools that are in front of them that didn't exist even 5 or 6 years ago.
Right. And there's a significant toolbox available to retailers today that just wasn't available.
It's crazy. It's good.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's good. I mean, there's a lot of junk out there, but there's a lot of good stuff too, Dan. And certainly what we do. But when you talk about marketing, I think one client that you talk about success stories. I mean, they had a good Instagram business, and they thought about how do we juice it up and take it to the next level. And they decided to hire a professional photographer. They realized that wedding photographers were busy on the weekends, but not during the week, and hired a professional photographer for $100 or $150 to come in on Wednesdays and take great pictures, and it increased their Instagram business by 30%. I think a lot of people don't know what to do when it comes to e-commerce, but they don't think about the content of how they message to their customers. And I think if you think about bringing artists and people who can write and deliver messaging better to your customers, that's a good investment. It might be an innovative change you want to think about for next year. And don't just do things the way you've always done them. Don't think that because you're the owner, you have all the answers and that, you have some kind of pipeline to a retail god. Open up to other people and other resources and explore those opportunities that could enhance your business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And so, Marc, let's talk about marketing a little bit. Not that that's really the focus, but even the way that you communicate with retailers has changed, certainly in the last, 2 or 3 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've tried to up our game. We've brought people in that can write content, copyright what we do, improve our visuals, and our messaging, our blog, all of the platforms that we're on, to make sure they stay current and meaningful and relevant. You think about the world is hooked to their iPhones. Or their Androids, their cell phones,
right?
And your ability to reach them has never been more easy. It's there, but you just have to have content that's meaningful to them,
right?
And stay engaged with them, and measure it. And the measuring is amazing. So I'm not a marketing expert. I'm just blown away by what's available to do today. And if you're not in that game, you're going to lose because your competition is. Your
competition is. And I really didn't bring it up to say really about marketing, but it was more about, if Management One, a company that is very science driven, is recognizing the power of art and the power of getting in her hands or his hands, why aren't the retailers doing a better job? And how much of what we do in science is defeated by their inability to paint a better picture.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, I think that the picture you paint is the window that the customer sees you through. Mm-hmm. And if you're not painting that picture well, then they're going to see something that, isn't going to help you. So I think spending some time thinking about how you curate that message. I mean, hopefully you're spending time curating the buys that you make and you buy all this great product, how you flow it in, how you deliver it, how you stay fresh. Those are all important. But if you don't have a way to reach your customers in a meaningful way to get them engaged, that's important too, because you want people's, so how do I bring more traffic in the store? It's like the number one question you always ask. And, right now, a lot of it has to do with how you market and how you message and the content you share with your customers and the events and the experience you create, not just with your people. I mean, I've always said that retail was about people and inventory. But now I would say how you message is equally important, and how you and how your people communicate that message. I mean, how much time do you spend sharing your vision of who you are and what you do and what your purpose is with your people? Because authenticity is important today. I mean, what differentiates you from shopping on Amazon is the fact that you can be authentic and create an experience that they can't duplicate, and you can do that because you have your own story to tell that's meaningful and important. And you can express that. So to the extent if you want to do something to change your business in 2020, you think about how you message.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I also think that, when I look at clients, or I have client conversations or client conversations with retailers, and they talk about, traffic and how do I get more people in the door, I believe that increasing the traffic through your front door starts with being a better servant to the people that are already in your store. And I don't want to use that kind of permission to play, a better customer experience, although I really do mean, customer experience is everything. I think that we have to look at better ways to serve the customer that we already have. We sometimes are a little bit too dismissive, with traffic or with customers. We have to do a better job with the ones we have and understand that we will organically grow the people that brighten our front doors through that service.
Well, I think if you look at the people who started internet businesses who are opening brick and mortar stores, I think you can learn from them and read their websites and the language that they use and the content that they use, the Warby Parkers and the Bonavos of the world. And because they understand the psychographic of their customer, not just the demographic of the customer. And I think to the extent that you can build your message around that, you can create traffic in your store, and and that means while they're in the store as well, to really cater to them, to who they are and what they do in terms of the events that you do, the environment that you create, and so forth. I mean, if your customer is somebody who goes to Starbucks a lot, well, why wouldn't you have Starbucks in your store? We have a client that did that this year. They figured out what they needed to do to make that happen, and it did, and they had grand results from it. But they understood the psychographic of their customer, and they knew their customers were hanging out at Starbucks a couple miles away. So why not just bring it to them?
Bring Starbucks into their store. Yeah, that's a great story. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that story well. Okay, Marc, I don't want to let you go without understanding who your customer really is. And I want our listeners, all three of them today, whatever that number is, to understand the market that you serve.
The market that we serve is the independent specialty retailer. Our client is somebody who enjoys using data to make decisions, uses data to be able to take risks. Our average client does about 1.2 or 1.3 million per location, but it doesn't mean we don't have that's average. We have clients that do, $500,000. I've got clients that I started with it. We're a $250,000 retailer that are doing millions of dollars today. And then we go up to about $100 million in revenue. And that's really our sweet spot is 1 to 10 stores, 3 to 1 to 3 million and then larger. But I would say our sweet spot is multi-store operation that does somewhere between 2 to 5 million, and we have people on either side of that range as well.
Of course. And so where can the retailer that's listening today find out more about Management One?
Right to our website, www.management-one.com, or go to, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, so you feel free to follow us. But the best way to reach us is just go to our website, learn a little bit about us, sign up on our contact page. Somebody will call you and not sell you, just get to know you and listen to you and hear what your issues and concerns are.
And I'll put a plug in for, the monthly Retail Orbit newsletter that goes out. It's got some really fabulous content. Get on there and register for that newsletter. I am a big proponent of, that content that comes out. Marc, your blog is fabulous. You always,
thank you.
You always inspire me when I read it. And as a retailer and as a business person, I look for that in my inbox, every month. Marc, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining us. It is truly, truly a pleasure.
Well, Dan, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege, and I enjoy our friendship and appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thanks, Marc. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.